Drake, Yormark's pulled some rabbits out of his hat.
Yeah.
Is there any way he could pull this one? Like, and what would a potential Notre Dame Big 12 marriage mean?
I don't think that Notre Dame would walk into the Big 12 conference and win the entire thing day one, by and large, going away and then dominate the entire league. I think that would be your selling point, though. If Notre Dame is going to join a conference, and I do think they should, then the Big 12 has to be an option on the table as one of the big three conferences in America. You can go to the SEC for Notre Dame. You're not going to fit. I don't think they want to do that. They've already been denied 4 times by the Big 10, so there's bad blood there. Understanding those two conferences don't have a very comfortable in with Notre Dame, the Big 12 is a couple of key moves prior to Notre Dame away from having a shot at the Irish, one of those being a North Carolina or a Miami. If the ACC falls apart because Florida State is suing, it's likely because Florida State and Clemson want to go to the Big Ten. They want to go to the SEC. And from there, Notre Dame, another viable option would be, hey, Jordan Brand, North Carolina. Hey, the city of Miami. Let's pair things together and us three go make the Big 12 on par with the SEC and the Big 10. That could be enticing to their athletic department. Do I think this is very likely? Not yet, but it could be. And one source makes the case. This is onefootdown.com. They're the SB Nation affiliate for Notre Dame. Says, hey, looking at the Big 12 conference, there's Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia. They have cachet. And the Irish haven't played Texas Tech or Kansas State, but they're fun opponents to see. And the Big 12 would have a fun basketball atmosphere with Houston, Kansas, Baylor. They also make the point that the argument for joining the Big 12 mirrors arguments made for independence in a bit. You have an opportunity to win. Now, in independence, and where understanding strength of schedule is hopefully becoming something that we look at more closely moving forward, that Notre Dame can build whatever schedule they want, go 12-0 and make the college football playoff every year. I'm hopeful that will change soon, but with a TV contract like the Big 12 has, with stability like the Big 12 can give, and then a schedule that Notre Dame feels as though it could win with, this makes sense. The quote says, a relatively soft schedule in most years that would create an easier path to the playoff. Unlike independence, this path would also give the Irish the ability to ride the soft schedule all the way to a first-round bye. There are layers to this. If you want the Irish to join a conference, you want them to do it quickly, you want them to win quickly, the Big 12 is going to be the place to do that from Notre Dame's eyes.
I know that they have the soft schedule or the partial schedule with the ACC. They would obviously lose that, pick up a full schedule with the Big 12. Notre Dame has always had pride, or prided themselves, if that's the right way to say it, on scheduling tough out of conference. They don't play FCS teams. And so they can still fulfill some of those rivalries that are really important, whether that be with USC, whether that be with Michigan, bringing that back, whether that be with Navy or some of the service academies, whatever kind of aspect they're looking at. And it would add some legitimacy to their schedule, right? Their schedule wasn't incredibly difficult this year. Some of that had to do with Florida State and USC being down. If those programs are performing the way that we think they should, probably looks a little bit different in November for them. But I do think that this would create a chance for them to schedule a little bit tougher. You could still pick all your out-of-conference stuff. You could still keep with the rivalry stuff, but playing against a BYU, a Colorado, if Coach Prime's still there, other places you mentioned, Kansas State, wherever, could be really big for them in that regard.
Yeah, I am. I'm very excited by the prospect of getting Notre Dame to a conference, because this is not very fair that one school gets to pick their own schedule. And sure, history has shown us Notre Dame's not going to shy away from big opponents. They'll schedule an Ohio State in the regular season, but what they can do is, in a year like this, like you talked about when Florida State is down or USC is down, ride the wave of a fairly easy schedule, and easy enough that they can lose to Northern Illinois and still go 11-1. Ride that schedule to the college football playoff. And really the only downside for them being independent is that you lose out on that first round bye, as I mentioned earlier. But I know the sample size is small. This season, no team that got that bye won their first game of the college football playoffs. So I don't think Notre Dame is screaming, give us a bye, because that's not, as it sits, that is not something that Notre Dame feels like it should need in the playoff format as it is. However, when you talk about Ohio State or UCLA or the teams in the Big Ten, that's where I lean is, hey, if you're not going to join the Big 12, and I can make cases for why Notre Dame should, they should at least be a very viable candidate for the Big Ten conference. Reason being, they get a conference's payout to themselves. They get a seat at the table in every college football playoff conversation. We're currently talking about changing the format, the bye format, and re-ranking teams and then doing all that. you have to vote unanimously amongst the 10 conferences and Notre Dame. Their athletic director gets to play commissioner, gets so much power in the hands of one person, not 16 schools all vying for this vote. No, one person gets to call a shot that could alter the entire playoff format just because we see Notre Dame and NBC as this big, powerful entity. What the college football playoff has to do is put its foot down and say, hey, look, we can't continue to operate with this one team doing it their own way. It was cool when Penn State did it. Okay, wow, there are different. Was Florida State independent at one point? Like there are major schools that have done this before, but in this era of college football, we can't let one institution just skate by, playing by its own rules and making up things at the end of the season. And I can only hope, and I don't hate Notre Dame, love Marcus Freeman, wish they would have won the game. I hope that they go 10 years without sniffing the college football playoff and realize, oh, shoot, we didn't make any money from the playoff for those 10 years. Trying to rig the system where we get all that cash and don't have to split it up, backfired. I really, really hope it backfires so they do end up with those awesome rivalries like a USC or UCLA or Notre Dame in the Big Ten, or quasi-dominating in their mind the Big 12.
There's some talk in the ACC about maybe trying to shift some revenue around and make things more enticing for Clemson and Florida State to stay based on TV and things like that. I know that the Big 12 doesn't necessarily want to get into a Texas-Oklahoma situation that they were in before. Would Yormark ever be open to the idea? Could he get other presidents on board with the idea of sweetening the pot for Notre Dame to come in?
You would have to. I don't think you need to do that for Miami right now based on their conference situation. They will end up being desperate if the ACC falls apart. If Florida State and Clemson jump ship and that conference ends up going under because the likes of SMU and Cal can't support it, then Miami needs somewhere to go. The Big 12 is probably the most viable option, considering the Big 10 and the SEC will not bite there. So while they seem desperate, Notre Dame is not. Brett Yormark would have to call the same as you would with a Florida State or a Clemson and say, look, if you want things to be weighted in your direction, if you think you're the big bad boss with the big brands and Florida State's got Saudi Arabian money and Clemson's winning football games, then come to our league. We'll build it on a scale to where your winnings are a direct correlation to your winning. And if that's the case for Notre Dame, hey, come make even more money, take a bigger piece of the pot than everybody else. If I'm Cincinnati, I can't be pissed off at that. If I'm UCF or Baylor or Texas Tech, you're giving that. No, because that scale is going to work for everybody and all involved. At that point, too, if let's say the Big 12 says, hey, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, we will unload the Brink truck for you to come to our conference and give you 50% of a 20-team share, everybody's going to be super ticked off. But if it means the ultimate salvation of the conference, you have to do that. Brett Yormark's going to have to do something if the SEC and Big Ten continue the separation they've created from the conference of the Big 12 from a money standpoint. That sounds really bleak, really dramatic, but truly, you need anchor brands that are going to keep you afloat when this really hits the fan.
Miami, Notre Dame, North Carolina, if they could pull in like a Virginia, maybe. Yeah. If they could go get the Atlanta market with Georgia Tech. I know that's not the sexiest brand, but a Georgia Tech would certainly help.
For some reason, Louisville makes a lot of money, and I don't know why.
Louisville would be really good. Realignment has somewhat died here during the season, which is fine. I like actual football more than hypothetical conference shifting. Yeah. But now that we're out of season, again, the day after the national championship, it is fun to talk about. It is fun to speculate on. We will probably both do it a ton, probably on our own and together. But where can people find your content, your work, and more thoughts on this?
At Drake C. Toll or at LO Big 12 on Twitter, wherever you find your podcast, and YouTube with Locked On Big 12.
Not to take shots at anybody else, but the best college football show that exists on the Locked On Network, if you ask me. So
you said it, not me.
Thanks, Drake.
Of course.